have been YAF and the Daily Wire. Whether you're a Daily Wire superfan or have seen the guys speaking on campuses with YAF, you know the influence these happy warriors wield among the rising generation. Even the mere mention of the guys' names strikes fear into the hearts of feeble campus leftists. And YAF has been proud to work with these rock stars to break up the left's monopoly of ideas. YAF began sponsoring Ben Shapiro's campus appearances in 2013. And since then, our partnership with the Daily Wire has helped spur awareness of Shapiro's brilliance through YAF's live streams of his lectures and unfiltered question and answer sessions with students. The partnership grew as YAF sponsored additional talent from the Daily Wire, including Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Andrew Klavan, and others. Throughout YAF's history, few speakers have maintained their popularity and influence among young audiences as Ben, Michael, Drew, and Matt have. These unmatched campus events disrupt the normal leftist narrative permeating higher education. Together, YAF and the Daily Wire created sincere, viral question and answer videos that have captured the attention of millions. In all, YAF videos featuring Daily Wire talent on YouTube have reached more than 595 million views and 3 billion impressions. Indeed, many YAF activists and many of you first found YAF by watching Ben Shapiro videos on YouTube. Together, we have reached incredible audiences of young people nationwide, and we are absolutely thrilled to be hosting this special partnership at YAF's National Conservative Student Conference. To kick off our morning with the Daily Wire, we have 3 individuals who are on the front lines of today's cultural and political battles. Mary Margaret Olohan serves as senior reporter and White House correspondent at the Daily Wire. She is also the author of D-Trans, a bold and timely book sharing the stories of those who've escaped the gender ideology cult. Cabot Phillips is the senior editor at the Daily Wire and a voice many of you will recognize from the Morning Wire podcast, where he helps break down the day's top stories. Tim Rice is the Daily Wire's Washington, D.C. bureau chief. He brings a wealth of experience to the newsroom, having previously served as senior editor at the Washington Free Beacon and press secretary at the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. And guiding this conversation is our moderator, Spencer Brown, chief communications officer at Young America's Foundation. Spencer is a former managing editor at townhall.com, has reported from around the world, and is a frequent guest on Fox News. Please join me in welcoming this outstanding panel.
Well, thank you all for being here with us today to kick off our morning with the Daily Wire. So excited to have you here. There's a lot of news going on, and I think just to kind of take a step back from all the crazy stories that are happening every day, what is it like for you waking up knowing you have to look at your phone and see what's happened overnight or what's going on? What is it like trying to cover the Trump White House, the news of the day? Let's start with Cabot.
Well, it's a lot easier to wake up every morning and look at my phone when I don't have to look at President Kamala Harris. So can we just take a moment? Guys. What a nightmare that would have been. So it's pretty easy waking up going, oh yeah, I get to wake up to President Donald Trump again. This is pretty nice. Now, as a reporter covering DC and politics, sometimes it can be really difficult to know, like, what's actually happening in the White House? What is going on in DC? Because usually administrations are very non-transparent, we'll call it. It's pretty nice with Donald Trump because you have a constant stream of consciousness on Truth Social. You can just say, like, what is the President of the United States thinking about today? And then you can go there. And that usually, from a journalist standpoint, actually is helpful to figure out very early in the day, like, what is hot on the president's mind right now? Some days it's why Taylor Swift is no longer hot in the streets anymore. Other days it's why India is going to pay 50% tariffs. You never know what you're going to get. And that's kind of the fun thing.
It is. It's a big part of this new Trump administration is that we actually have news. Imagine that. Instead of waiting days to hear from the president, we hear from him pretty much every single day, which as a White House reporter is so cool for me. I was in the White House 2 days ago, and I was able to ask the President of the United States whatever I wanted. How crazy is that? And we can do it because now the Daily Wire has a White House correspondent, which is me, which is so cool. And for the first time in Daily Wire history, we're in there, we're able to ask the president questions, and sometimes even better than that, when something happens that the liberal media, let's say CNN, says is happening, we can ask the White House, is this true or is this a lie? And we can confirm for ourselves and know whether it's true. So for example, yesterday, CNN said there was this big Epstein meeting happening at J.D. Vance's house. I was able to ask them, is that actually happening? And guess what? It's not. So that's the kind of really cool insight and honestly power we have as media to share the truth with the world, and I find that very cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's kind of easier this way, right? Everyone, news cycles don't last in the Trump administration. It's like drinking out of a fire hose. There's something new happening every second, and all of that's true. But being surrounded by that constantly, once you get acclimated to it, which I think, all of us, we've been doing this since the first Trump administration. So by the time you get used to it, it's actually way easier, sort of like what Mary Margaret was saying. You don't have to wake up and think, of course you do have to wake up and think, how am I going to break news, find scoops, in some cases investigate things. Some of our colleagues who do that will be here talking about it later. But for us, it really is just like waking up and saying, all right, what's happening? Who said what? And it's not just the president anymore, right? We've had Trump basically for a decade now. So everybody, the Democrats are always tweeting, cringe as it is, they're cursing, trying to sound cool. They're posting videos of them at the gym. Everybody is online all the time now. So yes, it is a lot. You wake up and, some of us wake up with infant children, and that's always fun too. And then it's like, all right, change the diaper, have some coffee, see what, Tim Kaine or Gavin Newsom has tweeted about while I was asleep, and just go from there.
Yeah, Mary Margaret, I want to touch on something you mentioned, which is, again, this access that the Daily Wire has for the first time when it comes to the White House briefing room. And that's not something that just happened because you sort of raised your hand and said, hey, we'd like to be there, and then you just got all this access. Talk a little bit about what it's like, not just covering the historic every day of what's going on in the White House, but sort of making history every day by disrupting the status quo that the legacy media enforced for so long.
Yeah, we're really proud to be in the White House because for years, and honestly, for decades, the only media in the White House are legacy media reporters. So all these outlets that you guys would think of, Washington Post, CNN, Wall Street Journal, these legacy outlets that have decided what the narrative is on politics, on the president, on pretty much anything you can think of. And part of the reason we've seen this disillusionment in legacy media is because they're setting a narrative. They're spreading ideology, the state ideology, I would say, under the Biden administration that you're all supposed to believe. But that's why no one cares about them anymore. The reason that people love the Daily Wire, the reason people love new media is because we care about the truth. We care about sharing with you guys what's actually going on, and we're good at it. And so that's why we wanted to be in the White House, because we saw such a resonance with the American people during this election. We looked at who they were paying attention to when they were getting their news throughout this campaign cycle. It wasn't CNN, it wasn't MSNBC, it was the Daily Wire and people like us who care about the truth. And so that's a main, huge reason that we're in the briefing room, because we have questions that our audience wants answers to. We care about what's going on in our world, and we're not just pushing a narrative just like the rest of the media. And it's an honor, it's really cool, but it's also a lot of fun, and every day is super different, and you never really know what's gonna happen, and I love it.
Yeah, and obviously not just disrupting things on campus or in the briefing room, but just in the media industry in general with the Morning Wire.
Yeah.
That was something that I think a lot of people early on were kind of like, oh, they have a podcast, great, but is far and beyond punching above what anybody thought I think its weight was. What has it been like to have a product that you just kind of start basically from scratch and see it grow into what it's become?
Well, the main reason we started the podcast was because we were trying to topple Ben Shapiro as the top podcast at Daily Wire. And he said, well, hypothetically speaking, your numbers will never be where my numbers are. And, it wasn't great. It didn't go great for us, but we're gaining ground. Do you guys listen? How many of you guys listen to like Ben Shapiro podcast, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh? Okay. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands for how many of you listen to the podcast that I do called Morning Wire. I don't want to say Morning Wire podcast. Okay, we got a few hands. This is good. Let's just assume that all of you listen and you're all nodding along to make me feel good about myself. Yes, you all listen. We just do a 15-minute news podcast. We do this crazy thing where we just tell you what's happening in the world and let you make up your mind for yourself. It's called journalism. It's called journalism. So please go listen to that. But I think the reason that the Daily Wire has grown, the reason that all of these conservative outlets and alternative outlets and independent outlets have grown it's the media's fault. It's the mainstream media's fault. They did this to themselves. And now the difference is people have alternatives that they don't have to just rely on the same 3 or 4 networks. So if you look at like polling data of when trust in the media collapsed, it started in 2015. That was when you saw the steepest decline. It's gone lower and lower since. And the reason for that is that in 2015, social media started to pop off. In 2015 and 2016, the media started pushing this Russia collusion narrative that we all now know was a complete hoax. And so as you had the media pushing these stories that turned out to be conspiracy theories that were true, as many of them are now, not only were people realizing, hey, you're not telling me the truth, but this was the first time in history where people could say, okay, I'm going to go find someone that will tell me the truth. And now in the last few years, with the explosion of YouTube and podcasts and social media, like, we're not prisoners anymore. We're not being held hostage by the mainstream media complex. And so that, like, shift has been made possible in a weird way by the legacy media losing the trust.
And before we dive into a couple specific stories, one thing, you both kind of alluded to this, but covering Trump is unlike covering anyone else that's ever walked the earth, basically. What is one, this week, for example, Trump was just up walking around on the roof of the White House and held like a press conference, kind of, just shouting back and forth. And the best thing was, again, the journalists standing there were just like, why are you on the roof? And he's like, I'm looking around. Like, what do you think I'm doing on the roof? I'm not throwing myself off of it. But what is one moment for each of you that's just been kind of like a pinch yourself moment in your work in the last several months that's just been like, how is this real? What is happening? And how do I get to do this as a job?
Ooh, I'd have to say the very first President Trump briefing at the White House, so this was back in like February, I think. I hadn't gotten any questions yet, and so the White House always surprises us with when we're going to talk to the president, and they announced, I think at like 10 a.m., the president's going to do a briefing at 11 in the briefing room. So all the reporters are frantically trying to get there. You try and get a good spot, and I got a question. And I looked the president in the eyes and asked him a question, which, might not seem like a big deal to me now, but in the moment it was kind of scary. And my phone started blowing up with everybody at Daily Wire saying, oh my gosh, we were watching you. And Cabot texted me and was like, you should have heard the roar in the office when you got that question in.
And Trump's response, his first words were, that's a good question.
But it's so cool. It was so fun to be supported like that and to know that our whole team cares so much about what we're doing. And then to just have that access to the president and realize that me, Mary Margaret, just, a girl, can ask the president a question and get an answer on the world stage, and that can have a huge impact on politics. So that was, I think, the moment it kind of hit me, what a cool job this is.
Yeah, that's right. For me, it was election night for 2 different reasons. One was just the sheer scope of the Daily Wire's operation on election night. We had, I've never been on a Hollywood movie set, but I imagine that's what it felt like. We had people everywhere. We were all live on set. Cabot was doing analysis in real time with a pollster, Brent Buchanan, who was crunching the numbers like literally in front of us. A bunch of us editors we looked like we were just there to be seat fillers, but we were actually running the website live on camera. Mary Margaret was in Florida. We had Spencer Lindquist in Washington. People were everywhere. We're coordinating with this team. There was a party going on right outside the studio where we were working, so we could hear people partying as we were covering this momentous story. So that was one moment where it was like, again, as everyone sort of touched on, it's 10 years of the Daily Wire, this thing that began, kind of in Ben's mind is now this massive company. So being able to be there and be a part of it was fantastic. And then also, of course, what actually happened that night. Going in trepidatious, obviously, with confidence that the president would do well, but, it's election night. The last one didn't go that well for us. We would go in and, Kamala, the early voting in Michigan or whatever, and then just being there and watching swing state after swing state fall definitively and immediately with no question. I remember the moment, whatever time it was, 11:30 in Nashville, midnight, and we realized that it was over, and everyone just sort of sat back a little in their chairs. We had about 5 minutes of celebration, and then it was like, all right, Trump 2.0, let's get back to work, and that was fantastic.
The only place that I would have rather been than the Daily Wire watch party is the Kamala Harris watch party. Because I'm not kidding. Like once a week, I will pull up the YouTube stream of MSNBC from election night, and I'm just like hitting my veins, just right into my veins. My favorite moment, the pinch me moment, was being at the first presidential debate when Joe Biden was still on stage. You guys all remember the debate. Joe Biden doesn't remember the debate, but we all remember the debate. And my favorite part was beforehand, we're in the press area, and I have reporters who are in the liberal media, and I'm talking to them beforehand, friends of mine, saying, come on, Joe Biden, he doesn't have it anymore. We can be honest, like it's just you and me off the record. And they're like, Joe Biden is mentally fit, he is doing cartwheels behind scenes, and I am confident he's gonna do great. I'm like, really, come on, you can say it. And the moment that he had that robot meltdown on stage, the pinch me moment was turning around and looking at all those same reporters frozen, and me just being like, yeah, oh yeah, it happened, beautiful. And they had this look of panic on their face. The panic was not, oh wow, this is concerning. The leader of the free world is not all there. That should have been the panic. The panic was, oh wow, the American people are going to now know that we've been lying to them. And that was a very telling moment for the American people to realize the same media that's been telling me for the last 4 years that Joe Biden is perfectly fit for office, what else have they been lying to me about? And I think that that moment was just a turning point, not just for the election, but for Americans' views of the mainstream.
Yeah. And I think another sort of media narrative that fell apart very quickly was dealing with the border crisis and illegal immigration in general. And we saw the line from the White House, at least at the time under Biden, was we need all these new laws so that way we can enforce the border and we'll secure the country if we can pass all this leftist nonsense. And then Trump takes office and it just shuts down. And it turns out you didn't need a new law, you needed a new president, and that obviously was confirmed when he took office and implemented his policies. But there's been so many downstream effects from that. We've had riots across the country again. We have, Democrats going down to visit gang members in El Salvador. It's just they've come unglued even more than we thought they could. What has it been like, I guess we'll start with you, Mary Margaret, what has it been like covering that from inside the White House?
Well, it's a really unique perspective because we're seeing what the White House is doing. First of all, they basically stopped any border crossings whatsoever, any illegal ones. It's crazy, right? That's huge. So we have no illegals coming into our country right now, which is massive. But at the same time, all these reporters I'm surrounded with want to have issues with that. They want to find problems with the Trump administration's actions. So they might want to say that someone that was illegally in our country was not here illegally. They might want to defend a murderer or a rapist or a pedophile. And so that's been really interesting to watch Caroline Leavitt up at the podium tell the world what these illegals have done. She'll list off their crimes, 6 counts of sexual assault of a child, or 6 counts of this or that, murder, pedophilia, assault with a dangerous weapon, all these horrible crimes. And she'll say it on national television and to these reporters' faces to help everyone understand who we're dealing with. And one of the most probably epic moments of the administration so far was when she brought in an angel mother whose daughter was brutally murdered by an illegal immigrant. And this woman stood up there at the podium, dressed all in black, not a stitch of makeup on her face, just completely crushed by the death of her daughter. And she looked all these mainstream reporters in their eyes and she said, please tell the truth. Please tell people what illegal crime is doing. And I wish I had my daughter back. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Now, not many of them reported on it. Not many of them talked about it on their nightly shows. But I think it made an impact. And this is what the administration is doing, is helping people understand the realities of what illegal crime is doing to our country. And now we have this big ICE recruitment push. I don't know if you guys have seen the ads. They look a lot like these World War II ads telling people, I want you to defend our country. They're pretty funny.
Yeah, I like this guy.
I know. Now they're recruiting your dad, too. So they're saying, hey, guys, you and your dad can go serve our country together. It's kind of cute. But in general, the administration is really pushing people to understand this is not just about politics. This is not just about elections. This is about keeping our country safe. And I think that message is really resonating with the American people.
I must say, when you talk about ICE recruitment, there's this narrative going around, there's a lack of good men out there and men who don't want to get married. For any ladies in the room trying to find Mr. Right, I would say get off the dating apps, go stand outside an ICE recruitment center. And as the guys come in, say, hi, it's nice to meet you. Let's get coffee. I think you might find a good husband there. You can see what his priorities are.
And you maybe get to meet their dad at the same time, so you get a sense of the family that you're going to marry into. You get the full package.
But it's so important to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. And when the left talks about these ICE deportation efforts, they're now saying, oh, ICE is invading American cities. That's their narrative. They're invading American cities. I don't know. I feel like the invasion was the 15 to 20 million people who came illegally. I don't think the invasion is trying to get those people out. Just for context, because the media kept saying for years, there is no border crisis. Just look away. There's nothing happening. 1 in 16 people living in America today came here in the last 4 years. 1 in 16 people came here in the last 4 years. So when President Trump starts saying, hey, we need to get some of these people out, they set a goal of 1 million a year. You could hit 1 million deportations a year and you still would barely make a dent. So this is a long-term process, and we all know why the left allowed this to happen. They want to give those people voting rights. They want to allow eventually illegal immigrants the right to vote. They want it to show up in the census so they can get more congressional seats. That is what we're up against, and that's why we have to be so resolute in supporting these ICE efforts.
The best thing about the Trump administration's push to close the border and deport illegal immigrants is the fact that we're securing the border and getting, in many cases, dangerous criminals off our streets and out of our country. The second best thing about the deportation push is that it forced Democrats and the mainstream media to say the quiet part out loud. Now, when this all started, I was hoping that they were going to admit to exactly what Cabot just said, to the fact that they wanted more future Democratic voters. My second hope was that they would maybe be forced to admit that this was out of some misguided humanitarian impulse, right? We can't, they do this to an extent. We can't let them go back to El Salvador. Well, why not? Is El Salvador that bad? Next time you talk about how great all these other countries are, right? Everyone had a meltdown when President Trump dared to say that there are some countries in the world that are bad. So they had to admit that. And they did a little bit of that, but they went even farther. They honestly impressed me. We now have elected Democratic members of Congress openly and proudly saying, we need to let illegal immigrants come and stay in this country because who else is going to pick our food, wash our dishes, do the jobs that Americans don't want to do? In 6 months, President Trump and his administration have gotten the Democratic Party to admit that they want a permanent slave class in this country and that they are willing to turn a blind eye to rape, murder, and illegality at the southern border in order to do that. And that is not going to be something that they will be able to. That's going to last longer than the ICE raids. That's going to last longer than the protests. That's going to last longer than this administration. That's not a thing that these politicians or their party or their successors are going to be able to outrun 1, 2, countless campaign cycles from now.
Yeah, and you, in talking about that, reminded me of just sort of the general bias, obviously, that exists in the media that conservatives loves to punch at because it's such an easy target because they're just beclowning themselves on a daily basis. But what do you think, not just on the border crisis or illegal immigration, but what are like 1 or 2 of the biggest false narratives you've been watching from your perch that you see the left and the mainstream legacy media trying to push right now?
I'll take that one. I think the biggest one we're seeing right now is this lie that Russia was involved in trying to stop President Trump, or trying to help President Trump become elected. And this is obviously a very long saga. It's convoluted and at times boring, but I can say for a fact that you all should know, we're finding out now that Hillary Clinton colluded with all of these different operatives to try and pretend that Russia tried to get President Trump elected when she knew it wasn't true. And she was trying to do this in order to distract from her own email campaign scandal. And so we are seeing all this unfold in real time as the FBI and these different agencies, Tulsi Gabbard, look into these materials and find out more and more evidence of this. And you'll know that this was covered up by the way the legacy media handles it too. Now they're saying, oh, emails were found that show that Hillary Clinton didn't know what she was doing, but maybe there was a cover-up. There's it's such a mess right now in how the legacy media is handling this because they were the ones that were getting all the scoops on this. They were the ones that were getting all the information and pushing out these lies. So that's one massive cover-up, massive scandal that we're seeing play out in real time. And President Trump has always been really vocal on this. He's talked about how this was not something that, like, Russia did not help him get elected, did not want him to get elected. And I think we can see that playing out on the world stage right now. He's playing pretty hard with Putin. So that's one that I've had an eye on. It's definitely convoluted and sometimes hard to understand, but it's a very good example of how the legacy media pushed all these activists or operative claims, and now they're getting exposed for it.
And that story was at this point, 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
We need to keep our foot down on this story. People need to go to jail for this. You may not be able to say this as a White House correspondent. I'm going to say it. People need to go for jail for this. This is an act of essentially treason, trying to rig our elections by giving people false information. We cannot let them off the hook just because it happened a few years ago. I think my favorite, or not my favorite, but I think the most important false narrative going on right now is not about a news story in particular, but it's about just the soul of our nation. The media wants you young people to hate your country. That is not, it's true. And I don't say that as a shock line or anything. They want you to hate your country. They want you to think that the desire to preserve our values, the desire to preserve our culture and what we are founded on is inherently evil. And that if you want to defend what our country is founded on, that you want to defend a system of white supremacy and slavery and all of that. And you can tell how effective this message has been just by looking at outward displays of patriotism. Remember a few years ago, like if you saw someone with an American flag shirt, you didn't know who they voted for. Or you saw an American flag, on a truck, maybe you knew who they voted for, but you saw like a guy with like a shirt that had something patriotic on it. It wasn't inherently a political statement the way it is now. Now, because the media has demonized our country, there's only one side of the aisle that it feels comfortable showing pride in America. And why do they do it? Why do they want you to hate your country? Because it's very hard to get people to go along with fundamentally upending all of our institutions and all of our values if people are proud of those things. If you can convince an entire generation that America is evil and racist and that defending any part of it is defending racism, defending terrible sins of our past, then it's really easy to get people to say, okay, you agree that was all bad? Great. Now let's change everything. Let's change our entire economic system. Let's stack the Supreme Court. Let's do away with the Electoral College. Let's redo our entire economy. Let's usher in all these new things. They want you to hate your country because they want to come in and have power, and they want you to say, okay, you're right. The country sucks. Let's turn it over. That is why they want you to do it. Do not fall for it. Do not let them make you be ashamed of the greatest country that has ever existed, that's brought more freedom and more opportunity to more people. Do not fall for that lie. I'm fired up.
Amen.
I'm fired up.
Let's go.
America!
He's got a weapon, too.
Yeah, the bat's sitting down here still. He's ready to use it. But that reminded me of another thing that's great about the Daily Wire is it's not just the churn and burn. Here's what Trump is doing. He's meeting with Putin. Here's what's breaking, how it affects you. But it's also the longer-term view on what's happening today and what that means for society, culture, America in general. And that's one area I know you've been doing some reporting on what's happening with birth rates in the country that I haven't seen covered by, obviously, the legacy media or anything like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we just got the latest data from the Census Department and CDC coming out last year. Americans are having fewer babies than at any point in the history of our country. The birth rate has declined 20% in the last 20 years. There were fewer babies born in America last year than there were in the year 1964, even though our population has almost doubled since that point. There is a huge fertility crisis going on right now where not only are people having fewer babies, more and more people are choosing intentionally not to have babies. And I think we need to foster a culture of life in our movement. We need to foster a culture of empowering people to have as many children as possible. We need to get all of the terrible chemicals out of our food that are having a biological impact on fertility. And I think we need to, as a movement, say, hey, we want you to have as many kids as possible. We're going to put our money where our mouth is. Vice President Vance has been great about this for standing up and saying, hey, we're going to give some economic incentives. President Trump has raised the child tax credit. He created these new Trump funds where they're going to give cash directly to parents in an investment fund for every new baby that is born. That is awesome. And we talk about media misconceptions and media narratives that are destructive. The lie that becoming a parent is the end of your life, do not fall for that. It is a load of crap. It is the greatest thing that you would ever do in your life. It will change everything in so many positive ways. You might get a lot less sleep like I did last night. Don't worry about that. And as I say this, my little son has just walked in. Can we all wave at my son in the back there? Hi, Asa. Hi, buddy. Hi. Oh, that's great. This is perfect timing.
That's great product placement. That's
Product
a great ad.
placement, yeah.
And in addition to get married and have lots of children, just before we go to Q&A, what would be just one quick piece of advice for all the young people here watching online, whether they want to go into the media or not? What should they do other than get married and have lots of children?
Other than that.
Yeah.
You should do that. I co-sign everything Cabot just said. You should read a lot. You should read everything. You should read us, obviously, first and foremost, and then none of our competitors. No, you should read everything, but you should also read the mainstream media, right? For a couple of reasons. One is that you have to know what we're fighting against. You have to get a sense of how they're trying to pervert the narrative. But the other is that unless and until we get to the top and the Daily Wire displaces the New York Times as the paper of record, which I fully intended to do, they're still going to have a little bit more access than us. They're still going to have a little bit more,
money.
scoops. Yeah, money, exactly. Yeah, resources. I have my old colleague, Judy Miller, who you guys are probably too young to remember. She's the woman Jon Stewart says started the Iraq War. She got pushed out of the New York Times after decades of loyal service, and she tells me that she still reads it every day because, she's like, no grudge is worth cutting yourself off from that. So read the libs, read us, but also read books, read plays, read poems, read other stuff. Don't just read about politics. It's kind of boring at points and it can be exhausting, and especially if you want to go into media. I tell all of my writers the best way to become a better writer is to read other good writers. It sounds cliche, but it is unfortunately very true.
I totally second what Tim's saying. I would actually argue read the classics. I think we have a lot of these liberal arts, Catholic students in here.
Take this with a grain of salt, though, because she wanted to become an English professor, so you can't really trust her.
I didn't do it, but the Iliad and the Odyssey are probably some of the best weapons we have.
Wow. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, more applause for the
Right
Odyssey
on.
than get married and have kids.
It's true, though, you guys. And being a good writer, a good reader, someone that can think logically, write clearly, those skills are going to help you more than anything else you're going to learn in college. So lean into it. Also, I would really urge you guys, take chances. There's a young lady in here, I think, somewhere. Emily, are you here? Emily Boulay? There she is. Emily, stand up for a sec.
Oh, God, Mary Margaret.
Emily wrote, everyone give Emily a big round of applause.
You don't even know what she did yet.
Emily took a leap of faith and called out Irish dancing for letting men compete as women. That's a scary thing to do. And she wrote it for Daily Wire, so we're very happy about her. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
Just published her second piece, by the way. We just published her second piece, which, if I can, sorry, before Cabot talks, I was to add on to Mary Margaret's Take a Leap. Don't be afraid, and it's easier than ever to do this. This is going to sound like a very baby boomer piece of advice, like print your resume on good paper, knock on the door of the place you want to work. If you want to work somewhere or you want to pitch a story, interview somebody, talk to somebody, meet them, find a way to reach out to them. Email them, DM them on Twitter. Not me, I'm too busy. But, you would be amazed. Like, with the exception of, like, Matt Walsh, most of us are just mortal men, or women, and we like hearing from students. We like hearing from aspiring journalists. We tend to have more free time than you might think, or than we like to complain about not having free time. So You never know. Worst thing that can happen is you don't get a response.
Absolutely, and I will say, someone gave me this piece of advice when I was just starting out, fresh out of college. If there's someone you respect, someone that you want to be like, send them an email. It's really not hard to find emails. I can tell you as a reporter, just type their name into Google and where they work and say email, and it'll pop up. And ask them, can I get coffee with you and talk about what you do? I promise they're probably going to say yes, especially woman to woman. I can just tell you, I always say yes, even if it's just a phone call. It's such a good thing to do. It can help you make a connection. Maybe it doesn't go anywhere right now, but then down the road, maybe they want to help you get an internship. Or maybe you just learn a little bit about what they do and you decide that's for you. So take a leap of faith, write the op-ed, pitch the op-ed, don't be afraid to speak out, and also just try and connect with people you respect, because that's going to help you down the road.
And invite us to campus to speak through YAF, because we all love being on campus.
That's
we love
right.
YAF. So make that happen. Seriously, we all love going to campus, and we love what YAF is doing. My piece of advice is a simple one. Don't apologize for the wrong reasons. There are so many times where I see conservatives who will speak their mind, they will speak the truth, They'll start to get pushback, and they'll say, oh, this is uncomfortable. People are calling me names. I don't like this. I don't want to be the odd one out. I don't want the culture to look at me funny. And they apologize, and they back down at the first sign of pushback. I just want to encourage everyone in this room. You should not want the approval of a culture that hates what you believe in. You should not want a culture that does not believe in free speech, that does not believe in the sanctity of life, that does not believe in the freedom of expression and association. You should not want that culture to look at you and pat you on the back and say, you're one of the good ones. You're one of those reasonable conservatives. You're not one of those crazy conservatives. You should want that culture to look at you. You should want the mainstream. You should want people to look at you a little funny. You should stick out. In a culture devoid of truth, the truth should stand out. You should feel a little awkward sometimes. You should feel a little out of place. That is actually a badge of honor. If you aren't taking any fire, if people aren't calling you ridiculous names that aren't true, it probably means they don't view you as a threat to their power. When you start having people pushing back, that's when you know you're in the fight. Keep going. Don't apologize for the wrong reasons. Don't back down. All that happens when you do that is you're showing them that you desire their approval more than you desire truth and your principles. Do not give in on that.
Well said. Yeah. And we are going to go ahead and take some questions now. So I think there's probably somebody out here with directions of where to stand.
I will also add right here, we have an American baseball bat signed by Ben Shapiro right here. Whoever asks the best question will be getting this bat. So I'm just throwing it out there. And I will throw it into the crowd.
Whoever asks the worst question gets a pop to the jaw.
Yeah.
We will now have time for a couple of questions. Please state your name, the school you go to, and one brief question.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Hannah Hyatt. I go to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Go Vols.
Go Vols.
Go Vols.
And I was wondering, what's your all's take on Dean Cain, the former Superman actor, joining ICE?
I think it's awesome. I mean, imagine being an illegal immigrant. You came into this country under Joe Biden. You were hoping for 4, maybe 8 years of safety under President Harris. Trump comes in, all of a sudden, young men and their dads are joining ICE. You're hiding in your apartment somewhere. Door busts down, and you see the ICE badge, and you're like, all right, this is it for me. And you look up, and it's Superman.
We'll leave it.
Hey guys, thanks for coming. Big fan of Daily Wire for a long time. Came for Ben, stayed for Clavenon. But my question is about for conservatives who are interested in like the old-fashioned kind of journalism, right? The people who like lived in their car and lived on like black coffee and cigarettes and didn't trust anybody. What would be your guys' advice on like how to get started doing that kind of stuff?
Start smoking cigarettes.
No, don't do that. That's very bad for you. So I would recommend that you just start freelancing. College Fix is a great place to do that. Get involved with NJC.
Campus Reform.
Campus Reform. All these places are so good. Just your local college paper. Find out what they need. Maybe it's a really random piece on housing or dorms or something like that. And just do it. Do a good job on it. And the more you do it, the more skills you're going to get. You're going to figure out how to write accurately and quickly and to get all the right information there. And as you build those foundational skills, when it's time for you to move to a real outlet, or like a national outlet, or maybe somewhere like Daily Wire, Daily Caller, Federalist, you're going to have developed those skills so that you can lean in and write some really great scoops and be the kind of gritty reporter that you're talking about. I think I have many friends that fit the description you're talking about. Sometimes legacy media likes you to think that Daily Wire reporters or other reporters aren't doing the nitty gritty. We are. We're getting the real scoops. We're the ones that are getting the real stories. Speaking of ICE, I was just talking to a whole bunch of guys that sent me DMs about how they did join ICE or they're trying to join ICE, and I'm writing a story on that. So any kind of unique, original reporting, that's the real deal, and anyone can do it. You can do it right now. So just get down to the basics. Write about things that you know and do it on repeat, and you'll get there. I
would add 2 quick things to that. One, don't try to be pretty good at covering everything. Be really good at covering 2 or 3 things. Make those things your expertise, and I think that's a helpful path to go down. And number 2, I'll add, there are still nitty-gritty reporters like that in the movement. We have one of them at Daily Wire. Leif Lemahue, one of our reporters now, when we hired him, We said, how soon can you start? And he said, I'll be there Monday. He had no money saved up. He had no place to live. We didn't find out for 6 months. He spent the first month living in a tent in Nashville. He went to a campground and lived in a tent. Now, don't think that all of us are not generous. I would have given him our guest room if I'd known that. He didn't tell anybody. He just said such a desire to work in media, work at Daily Wire, that he said, I don't care. I'll go buy a tent and I'll just camp out for a while and I'll shower at a local gym. That's the kind of dedication that people have to get into this industry, and I think it's commendable. But hopefully you tell someone if you need a place to stay. Don't go live in a tent. Sorry, leave.
Thank you, guys.
Good morning. My name is Lydia Hernandez. I had a quick question. I'm going to ask this to the people, but I feel like it's more appropriate to ask you guys. I'm curious to know, what is your guys' opinion on Trump not releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files? I personally do not believe that he was guilty of crimes or else the left would have used it against him before he got reelected. But I kind of feel like iffy about the whole thing, especially just the narrative changing just to be quiet about it.
I'll take that one. I'll shield Mary Margaret. As a White House reporter, I know you have to be a little careful. I think it's a huge failure that the Epstein documents have not come out. I think we can support President Trump and the Trump administration when they do good things. But as principled conservatives, we need to call them out when we think that they're not doing a good enough job. And I think that there was way too much overpromising going on from the Attorney General, from Kash Patel at the FBI, people beforehand, telling us what we were going to see, telling us we're going to get you all these documents, we're going to get you all these names, and then not getting it. So either one, they were overpromising and they hadn't actually seen everything and they assumed that they would get that information. That might be the charitable thing. Or two, all these things do exist and they're saying, oh, we can't release these now. So either of those things are concerning. I do not think that President Trump is implicated in any real crimes there, because for the last 4 years, when the Biden White House had controlled the DOJ, don't you think they would have said, here's the smoking gun evidence? No, I don't think they were saying, no, we can't throw Donald Trump under the bus. Of course, they would have released that information already. I have some theories about why they haven't released it. Maybe I can't say them, but I'm going to say them. I think there's a good chance that old Jeffrey was maybe cozied up to some intelligence operations, and that they don't want to let the American people know that he may have been doing that. That's just a theory. That is my own personal theory. I'm not representing Mary Margaret or Tim or Spencer. I'm not representing the Daily Wire. I just think that would be very plausible.
And I think from a journalist perspective, we always want to call for truth, for transparency. So, when we're asking questions to the administration, we want to know what the actual facts are, what we should be, learning from all these different agencies. And the good news is that we have been getting more information from these different agencies. There's been a push for transparency here. And I think the Trump administration was a little slow on that at first, but now we're getting a little bit more. So we'll see what develops with Galain Maxwell, who's Jeffrey Epstein's cohort. We're probably going to get some information from her soon. So everybody keep an eye on that, because she is a major player in this scandal. So that's what's next.
We now have time for one final question.
Thank you, guys. Big Morning Wire fan here.
You're getting the bat.
My name is Chuck Schumer from Stanford Law School.
I'm sorry.
Wait, your name is Chuck
what?
Schumer?
That's my name.
No way!
He's definitely getting the bat.
You are reclaiming that name, and I love it.
Thank you.
Daily Wire fan Chuck Schumer. Put it on the marketing materials.
I was wondering, of course, we're sort of on the same team as the White House, but it's still the job of the media to be critical and hold the administration accountable. So how do you do that? Obviously, the Biden White House really failed with that, with the media, legacy media. So how can you hold the White House accountable while still being on the same team?
I'll take this one. You just have to keep doing the job day after day, right? You have to. This is actually honestly a great question to end on, because it's a good culmination of everything that we've said, right? If you do everything that we've talked about, if you work hard and care about facts, ask questions when you get the opportunity, if you have courage and you're not worried about not just Cabot said, you shouldn't fear criticism from a culture that hates you, but you also can't be afraid, oh no, the White House is going to be mean to me, right? And they might. Like all comms people will be mean to you if you write something that they don't like about their boss. But if you do all of these things, eventually when something bad comes up, you're going to have to cover it. A, because you have values and courage and virtue and a commitment to truth and honesty and real journalism, but also because if you've been doing it long enough, the second you turn into a toady, the second you turn into just rewriting what the White House wants, people are going to notice. Mary Margaret has been doing this for so long at so many outlets. She's written a book. She's an expert on things. As is Cabot, less so Cabot, but like,
fair.
If Mary Margaret one day just woke up and started writing pieces that were like, great news, President Donald Trump, our dear leader, has incredible hair, people would be like, is that Mary Margaret Olohan? Didn't she used to be a real reporter?
It is true, though.
So it's not just, of course, Mary Margaret would never do that because she's a good journalist and has integrity, but also even if she wanted to, even if she was tempted to, she couldn't because at this point she has a real reputation, as do, I like to think, myself, Cabot, some of us in this industry, not everybody in the industry. But yeah, you just really got to do it.
And I would just add on a final note, part of the way we do that is by asking the questions that might be scary to ask sometimes, right? So, if there's a big topic in the news and, President Trump might not want to address something on it, maybe we make the call to ask him about it and to find out what's going on there. Maybe we ask a question that's a little intimidating because we want to get the answers there. I think a good example of this is you probably all heard there was some unrest about whether President Trump was going to back off deporting illegal immigrants who are working on farms. Well, we were at a press conference with the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, recently, and this was in the midst of all this, and nobody had found out yet whether they were going to back down on this. So I talked to Tim and our boss, Brent. I said, should I ask this? And they were like, yeah. Actually, no. They said, you should ask this. And so I asked Brooke Rollins, I said, are you going to back down on this? We're hearing there's a big donor movement to tell you don't deport these illegals on farms. And she gave us a really good answer on it, and it made national news that day and was leading all the front page of every outlet you've ever seen. And that's part of our job, right? It's bringing real news, asking real questions, even if it's something that the administration might not want to talk about right at that moment. And that's just what we do as reporters. So I think, if you look around at these outlets around you, pay attention to who is really talking about everything, not just the stuff that is comfortable, not just the stuff that they agree with, because that's a role of a real reporter, is to fight for the truth, to release the truth, to fight for transparency, and to report the news.
Well said. Everybody, please join me in giving another round of applause for our panel being here today. Thank you so much. Appreciate your work, and we'll continue following it. So join me in giving them another round.
Yes.
Chuck Schumer, come get your bat. Oh.